Good evening. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. These are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to tonight's program, which is presented in partnership with Elliott Bay Book Company. We're grateful to our author series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times for generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. Our friends over at Elliott Bay Book Company have copies of Carolyn and Derek's books, and you can find their books at Elliott Bay's website, elliottbaybook.com, and I will also post a direct link to each author's books in the chat during the course of the program. As I mentioned, we also have ASL interpretation and closed captioning available tonight. To access the closed captioning, just click on the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then that should enable the captions. After tonight's readings and conversation, we'll have time for questions from you. You can ask your questions at any time by writing them in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. Finally, we're interested in hearing from you. Toward the close of the event, we'll be posting a link to a survey in the chat and would appreciate it if you took a minute to fill it out after the program. Now I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speakers. The title poem in Carolyn Wright's book, This Dream, the World, New and Selected Poems, won a Pushcart Prize and also appeared in the Best American Poetry 2009. Carolyn's groundbreaking anthology, Raising Lily Ledbetter, Women Poets Occupy the Workspace, received 10 Pushcart nominations. Carolyn has 5 earlier books of poetry, a volume of essays, and 5 award-winning volumes in translation from Spanish and Bengali. A contributing editor for the Pushcart Prizes, she teaches at Seattle's Hugo House and for conferences and festivals worldwide. Carolyn has held a Fulbright and other fellowships in Chile, India, and Bangladesh, and she returned to Brazil in 2018 on an Instituto Sacatar artist residency in Bahia. She's also received NEA and 4Culture grants and a 2020 to 2021 Fulbright Scholar Award will take her back to Bahia after, or you'll have to correct my pronunciation on that, Carolyn, after the COVID-19 pandemic subsides. And now I'm happy to also welcome Derek Pollard. Derek is the editor of Till One Day the Sun Shall Shine More Brightly, the poetry and prose of Donald Revel, author of the poetry collection On the Verge of Something Bright and Good, and co-author with Derek Henderson of the poetry collection Inconsequentia. Derek serves as series editor for the Poets on Poetry series, founded by Donald Hall and published by the University of Michigan Press, and is the co-founder of Constellar Creative, where he partners with clients from leading healthcare networks to internationally renowned scholars to create and edit content that's so compelling it seems like you, the reader, came up with the ideas on your own. I love that, Derek. Let's give a warm welcome in the chat to our speakers. And hello, Carolyn and Derek. So nice to see you. Derek, I think you're going to open tonight's program, is that right?
Yes, it is, Stesha. And I want to thank you and Karen, Laura, Joshua, and Mary for all of the extraordinary work you're doing. This is such a wonderful invitation and a great opportunity for us to get together. I'm coming to you from West Palm Beach, Florida. It would be quite a commute were I to be in Seattle. And I just want to say I really appreciate the cultural organizations that are continuing to provide this kind of programming so that we can come together in community around the country and around the world. So very, very meaningful for me. And I'm thrilled to be reading with Carolyn.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your kind words. And we're so excited to have you here tonight. So without further ado, lay it on us.
Well, I'd like to begin this evening by reading the first paragraph of Nicole Seeley's foreword to June Jordan's collection Passion, which Copper Canyon reissued. Nicole's first paragraph begins, about the politics inherent in her work, June Jordan once explained in an interview, I don't see where I can afford to be what I call trivial, because these are not trivial times. This is an apocalyptic moment in our history, American history. Jordan wrote like lives depended on it because they did, because they do. And I want to read one of Jordan's poems from the collection. It's entitled Memoranda Toward the Spring of '79. The Shah of Iran was overthrown by only several million, mostly unarmed, inside agitators. The Daily News reports that one American among the first to be evacuated, Patsy Farnes of Seattle, said she somehow enjoyed the whole thing. Coming off the plane with 2 Persian cats and a poodle, she said, "It was a lovely experience. I didn't want to leave." The instruction booklet for cooking with a Chinese wok declares as follows: with use, your wok will acquire the blackened look of distinction. Martin Luther King Jr. is still dead. The sponsor for the memorial program on his birthday is the National Boat Show at the Coliseum, running January 13th through the 21st and open to the public. If only I could stay awake until 3, then on channel 11, I could watch part 1 of Adolf Hitler, but then I'd be too tired to get up by 8 to watch Captain Kangaroo and Woody Woodpecker on channels 2 and 5. The Shah of Iran was overthrown by only several million, mostly unarmed inside agitators. There must be something else on television. Martin Luther King Jr. is still dead. Dear Abby, the idea is 24 red roses, but there isn't any form around the house. Please advise. It seems suddenly a foolhardy endeavor to attempt to follow June Jordan, but I've left myself that unfortunate task. I want to read a few poems from my latest collection. This is on the verge of something bright and good. And before I do, I want to thank the entire editorial and production team at Barrow Street Press for creating a book that is even more beautiful than the poems seem to warrant. My deepest gratitude and appreciation for all of their efforts and all of their support. The first poem I'm going to read is entitled, "The Sentence is Given Credibility Because Frida Jackson is Beautiful but Turns Ugly." This actually is a poem that parts of which, the italicized parts of which on the page, are taken directly from a paper that I found lying on the top of a recycling bin when I was in the graduate program at the University of Utah, a very long time ago now, it seems. And so I'll do my best to accentuate the parts of this poem that really are found material. The title is the first of those pieces. Alma Vidovich, whose procession goes gladly, nothing garish could e'er intervene. This means that sometimes we need to let ourselves be afraid and express feelings of anger, which song once refused suspends its measure. Alma, the ache of a jawbreaker, more the breaking itself. By this statement, he is making us feel daring and unafraid. Neon wheel over the gateway inn, horizon bled with ash, bled with pumpkin seed. Alma, every mountain certain in its standing. In this statement, he is using logic to get to the conclusion. Saying what exactly? A, L, M, A. The moment in the moment's apostrophe, abandoning the apostrophe. This next poem is entitled John Cassavetes Keeps Coming Up in Conversation. And I have to say, I always feel compelled to admit that I have, in fact, seen many John Cassavetes films. Today is the 3rd of July, and the country is drunk on tenterhooks. It's no different in Red Bank, where the rain came all in a fit last night, filling what bottles stood empty, strewn about the lawns, damping the fuses of every firework left unlit. Isn't there enough excitement without the new noise? What of the raspberries picked and eaten only just the other morning? The squirrel we saw tumbled beneath the tires of a squad car speeding through the neighborhood. Your period. The green fullness of the grass and the trees. The war is a war we all fight and is near. How to love in the midst of tumult. Everything else is meaningless tribunal. Either we take up arms or we don't. That is our life. Even though the choosing is feigned and the war a dream we return to in vain each night in the hope of screwing this star or that, having our names up in lights, the world at our feet. Is this the way it started, John Cassavetes? Has anything changed? This next poem is entitled Feathered Hair, Missed Appointments. I want a cowboy. I want a streetlight. I want a parkway. Much as I missed you, this is feathered hair, missed appointments, your fingers soft against the flume of my throat. To love you is this exact moment, alone and ongoing, the song forgotten, not in the rose we hang at the cross's bloodied hinge, but in the wilderness of its singing. This next poem is entitled Adam's Game. Birdsong lost to the violent wind, autumn wrenching the windows from their frames. It is the gate, not the door, whose jambs have been undone. Threshold worn onto breaking, culmination of that cruelest game, which is the game of naming, Adam's game, which also erased the song of the birds from our hearing. And then the last poem I'd like to read from the book is Dear Lucifer. Everything cool and ringing, this moment, oh Hindiger, oh dear Lucifer. Frozen hand banging uselessly against the ice. Heaven, cheap and sheer, light above and sound, voice cut short, cold through the teeth and throat, wakefulness, brittle, glassy, tin whistle echoing along the crystal's thin edge, song, shrift, plaintive shrieking. Stasha, you had mentioned in the introduction that I found myself founding a business over the course of this past year. Consular Creative is still very new in the world. And because of that, I'm finding that so much of my creative energy, so much of my time is taken up with building a business, connecting with clients, creating content. And so I don't know why it struck me, but I found myself pulling Bob Hess's Essential Haiku off the shelf several months ago, thinking not, of course, that haiku would be easy, right? 3 lines, 17 syllables. My kid could do this, right? The truth is, you couldn't be more wrong in talking about a form. And I know, Carolyn, your work will speak to this, and I suspect that this will be something that we wind up talking about after your reading. But a form that is so concentrated and so demanding requires such tremendous discipline. So although I would love to be able to say that I have been writing haiku every day since the end of November of last year, I have been aspiring to write haiku every day since late November of this past year. And I would like to share a few of these. And I do this, and I just want to again acknowledge my goal in setting out, in giving myself this little bit of time each day, is really to try to internalize this form to such a degree that I'm not thinking, right, syllables per line. I'm not thinking. It speaks in its own way to such a degree that I am at the behest of the haiku. I am nowhere near having found my way into the form to that degree, but it is such a pleasurable endeavor. And I suspect that this will be a lifelong discipline. And I suspect that that is precisely how much time it takes to be able to embody the haiku in the way that when it is done well, you see, you hear, you feel. I just want to share some of what will ultimately be like the most juvenile of my haiku juvenilia. This was a haiku I wrote on January 1st. I was staying with my aunt in Clearwater, Florida. Year's end, fireworks stunning even the goldfish circling their bowl. The next comes from Highlands, New Jersey, where I long lived and worked. I was able for the first time since before the pandemic began to return to my home away from home. It was an absolute joy to be there and to spend time with distant friends who are very, very near again. I found myself with the opportunity to walk the Henry Hudson Trail, which gives you a view over New York Harbor, across the bay, with Manhattan against the skyline. The poem reads, "The trail wet with mud, slick beneath these boots, unworn for how many years?" And then finally, more recently, this poem just from earlier this month, written here in West Palm Beach, where we do have winter. It is a thing in the world. But it is nothing like winter as I knew it growing up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and nothing like I remember from living, say, in Salt Lake or in Highlands, New Jersey. Even here, among the orchids, winter has stilled in the birds their song. Again, I want to thank all of you this evening for joining us. Stasha, Karen, are absolutely exquisite interpreters, and Carolyn, to be able to join you in reading is an absolute pleasure for me and an honor. I really appreciate being here, and I am so looking forward not only to your reading, but also to the Q&A. For all of you joining us tonight, uh, thank you so much for making time. I know I'm coming to you, it's almost 9:30 in the evening. So I very much appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward, Carolyn, to your reading.
Thank you so much, Derek. That was just, the poems were so beautiful and powerful, and I look forward to hearing both of you speak later. So thank you so much. And now I am delighted to welcome Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn. Oh, we gotta stay hydrated.
Hello. Oh, hello. Yeah, have to stay hydrated. Yes, and I am also coming from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, specifically the Duwamish people. So I'm glad to be here, not too far away from the actual library and Elliott Bay books. But the poems in this new book, Masquerade, are set in a number of places, and I'm going to focus on the ones set, a couple of them set in the original meeting place. This is a memoir in poetry featuring an interracial couple struggling to find a place together in basically racist America. You know, a few decades ago, but some things have changed, some things have not. The first poem, and this is basically Cape Cod, which in the book is called Cape Indigo. By the way, the book looks like this. There you go. It looks like Mardi Gras meets Fillmore West. Okay, the first poem is called Round at First Sight. Notice the word that's left out of the phrase at first sight. It's too early for that. Through the window's louvered blinds, you glide in profile across the room, angled pitch of your hips, almost a dancer's, backlit by a single kitchen bulb. That's all. Through twilight's translucent blinds, you glide through backlight that falls foursquare on the outside veranda where I hover, waiting for my door to open, glancing through the next door window where you glide in profile, the room falling in foursquare light onto the veranda at my feet, next to the studio's caretaker turning the key in my door, angle of your dancer's silhouette flooding my breastbone with sudden fear. Or is it the single kitchen bulb that silhouettes you in profile in your studio, a reversed mirror image of my own next door, where the caretaker turns the key so that I can step inside my mirror image in reverse? Next door studio, where I will live a year beside you. Fear's light falls on all fours at my feet. Your profile in silhouette, the blinds half open. Have you noticed my moment's gaze that goes on a year until I step into my studio and close the door? Your image profiling mine through louvered blinds. You may have heard a certain patterning in there, a certain deal of repetition with variation. That's the round form. And now still in that same location, those studios, side-by-side studios on Cape Cod. This is a poem a little later. The two people are better friends. They know each other now, and there's a little bit of humor in here, and they are cooking. They're preparing some food, among other things. And you'll notice some of the lines, they'll be at the end of one phrase, you'll hear in the next phrase a kind of a hook, an echo or a repeated word or a similar word in the beginning of the next. This is called Gumbo Nights. Move away from that table, you tease, as I help myself to a plateful of your Creole etouffee. You're gonna end up wide as you are tall. All those evenings you chuckle at your own jokes as the gumbo shimmers with scallops and okra, shallots and filet, while I stir batter for the cornbread and splash a shot glass of burgundy into the squash chowder's slow ochre bubbles. Trouble's brewing, you smile, smoothing your hands over the bottle of budget Chardonnay as if it were a woman. Inside that thin woman, there's a fat woman fighting to get out. Out pops the cork with a satisfying thwack, to which I laugh my answer, popping my own cheek with a finger as you light the gallows jug candle with its fringed skirt of wax drippings, centerpiece of my thrift shop tablecloth. The kitchen walls lean in to listen, and I listen as Sarah Vaughan croons Lover Man on my small radio, almost a lullaby that winter when jazz is as new to me as Cape Cod's lilac dawns. Dawn is a voice still trembling in my throat, but Nina Simone's bent blue-violet notes soothe my body into believing in itself. Do I believe what you call the body's shy audacity as we sip from after-dinner jelly glasses, last of the Chardonnay, smoky and pale, while you gaze at me, appraise me, and I gaze back, matching the gleam in my eye to yours? Your knock on my door on New Year's, weeks before, as I unpacked the gift-wrapped packets from a visit home. The same day, one of your old lovers headed home after a week-long rendezvous. Through my wall, 2 sets of footsteps hollow on floorboards of your studio, echo receding down the wood plank steps, thud falls on winter's frost-heavy path to the bus stop. Stop it, I almost told myself, but didn't, because Billie Holiday growled, "How could you?" to some double-dealing lover from her tiny big band stand inside my radio. The radio's lingering swing as I heard your steps retrace themselves, erase themselves from the walkway and wood plank stairs, canceling out all short-term memories. Forget that foolish week, you murmured, your face as I let you into my studio, haggard with bravado. Did we know the midnight hour had already tolled for us from the church steeple's pale melon clock face? Let's face the music and dance, cried the music in my head, ahead of yours for a change. A change gonna come, I know, cried Sam Cooke, a change the woman whose fury sent him out beyond the sky never could have known. What did we know then, as you stood up and came around my table to take me again as your lover? Lover man, oh, where can you be? Sobbed the jazz women on the radio, as the woman I was then gave in and let you come, though I was already moving away from the table. Well, a little change of scene now. We're going to move to New Orleans and to the neighborhood where this couple was living in the days, early in the year and through Mardi Gras and into the next year. The neighborhood was called Faubourg Marigny. It's next to the French Quarter. We live on Royal, between piety and desire. The old slave quarters, shotgun houses with barred windows, antique bronze plaques, and rows of mailboxes by the door, their decor chic macabre. the planter's mad widow bursting into flame, a house full of servants going down like Moses in their chains. The river at the end of the street, not Samuel Clemens' steamboat road across the color line. Below sea level, houses of the dead float on their pilings. We stare at the masts of freighters riding at anchor above the trees. Garçonnier, the dropped roof, rooms just wide enough to show us what isn't ours. Riot lights at dusk shine on the bellies of nighthawks, and in boarded up houses, ghost laughter echoes down airless halls. Someone sings gospel in the street after the bars close, his voice rising above Blue Mitchell on the stereo. The last bus rattles by. The sign on the front reads, Desire, Florida. A sneaky way to say, get out of town. We don't like your kind. The words of the mean sheriff in the movies reminding us we'll always be strangers here. We dream of we dream of springs 100 miles inland. Every night, barge whistles sound the old imperatives. Underground rivers play the lethal blues of whirlpools. The city turns slowly on the current as we sleep. Okay, and we're going to stay in New Orleans. Back in those days, we had, remember the rotary dial telephones with the really heavy receivers. Those were good phones. They lasted. They also belonged to the phone company. But I got pretty good at dialing on the phone and being the second caller into WWOZ's free ticket giveaway. And the second caller was always given a set of free tickets, usually to the Blue Room, which was a jazz club in New Orleans, down near Canal Street somewhere. So I won a number of tickets at various times. And one of those was to go hear Betty Carter, the late great Betty Bebop Carter, at the Blue Room. What a little moonlight can do, she croons, leaning into the indigo spotlight, her dress a shimmer against the sequined backdrop, her vocalese an alto sax's reed flutter. She breaks into scat syllabics, working the room as if she can't help herself. Notes soaring off into tremolo no one can sidestep. We sit with our mixed drinks, holding hands in a Berylline penumbra, just below the stage where we could live by our own rules. Your dark profile limned against midnight, eclipsing my lunar skin. She glides across velvet draperies, bends her head back in the beaded glow, eyes half closed like a woman gone into ancestral trance, feather notes fingered in melancholy's slow caress. My one and only love. This is our blue period. Free passes and one drink per set, the linen draped table where we linger till closing, glancing into each other's eyes as if to surprise ourselves. What doors does she open as she sidles between her sidemen, reshaping love's old standards in a slow dissolve, subverting the after glimmer? Everything she has is ours, the room behind us, shadow light, and nobody's business that we're here. No other lovers between us. We walk home from Canal Street, to save on carfare and third-degree stares, burning through nights that almost keep their promises. Sublunar murmurs long past denying, refrain of our presence, coda and reprise, the city's scrim curtain of invisible stars. You unlock our cobalt shuttered door on Royal Street, memories oblique interstices, and we slip into each other's arms. Let a little moonlight have its way with us. And of course the doors close at that point. And now inside that sort of shotgun apartment, this is called One Afternoon on Royal Street, and it's patterned after a poem by Kelly Cherry, who had patterned her poem after a poem by Czesław Miłosz, the great Polish poet who won the Nobel Prize. By the way, I heard him read in New Orleans. I remember he was amazing. One Afternoon on Royal Street. You are reading Le Nègre. I am writing to César. The sun gleams like a gold doubloon over the levee and the early winter bloom of camellias, the blue flame trembling in the wall heater. Sun is blooming with the cool flame, and you are talking over César and the early news. I am writing, and camellias are listening past you to the voice of César blooming like a dark sun. Your voice is a blue flame gleaming on the pages of Le Nègre. The levees are trembling winter's darkest gold. Listen, I am talking to you. And I have two more poems to read that one of them is, the first one is a short one called I Forgive. It comes after one of the more painful moments in this relationship, and you'll hear what it is. I forgive my left hand for not hitting back when Roy Otis's big hand slapped the glasses off my face. And I forgive my left arm for not rising to block his open palm coming toward me. I forgive my right hand for dialing 911, for hanging up when he yelled no, and I heard the wanted man's terror in his voice. I forgive my ears for hearing the patrol car roll up a minute later and screech to a stop. I forgive my eyes for watching two beefy cops burst through the grill work door and straddle the front room's floorboards. Roy Otis, gray-faced with fear between them. I forgive my heart for being glad. When the white cop shifted his grip and demanded, "What do we do with him, lady?" I forgive my tongue for saying, "Let him go." Now, there's more to that story, but it's there in the book. And I'm going to conclude with a poem that actually takes place some years later in the section that's called Reflections in Blue. There's been time between the events in the main story, the main relationship. There's been time to reflect a good deal, and this happened to be a sort of a reunion that happened, and it's in the form of a ghazal, which is a form from South Asia, the Middle East, originally from Arabic, Persian, and Urdu, and which was very much made really relevant and well known in this culture by the late great poet Agha Shahid Ali, who wrote a wonderful book called Ravishing Disunities, the Real Ghazals in English. And so this poem is a ghazal in that form. You'll hear the repetitions at the end of the lines. And it begins with a line from the great ghazal poet Fez Ahmed Fez. And the translation of Fez's line is by Agha Shahid Ali. Ghazal, other than yours. How could one weep for sorrows other than yours? That grief-struck summer, I seek no refuge other than yours. In that midnight room, alone with you after so long, I want no deep song other than yours. Night descends its spiral staircase, unfolds its sable patterns on the bed. No skin satin other than yours. You're my Shiva with a blues guitar, I teased you once. What laughter in those days other than yours? Will you get in trouble for this? You question as you take me. Whose trouble? Whose face on the pillow other than yours? Those ghosts, our years together. Have I crossed 3 states for embraces other than yours? Forget those foolish nights. In tears, I quote myself. No past lies down with the present other than yours. Your skin's scent of musk and arrowroot, could I forget? No flesh rises between my hands other than yours. Shiva's marvel-veined haft I ride all night, whose body speaks through dreams other than yours. All night between my lips, questions I mean to ask. All night, no sweet oblivion other than yours. If you say the word, I'll stay. You slide to the bed's far end. What silence so eloquent other than yours? For weeks I would cry out to you in dreams. No steps would retrace themselves in dreams other than yours. We have it out in dreams as we never had. What debts recollected other than yours? Next morning, you're miles away across the room. No history won from struggles other than yours. Fez cried, don't ask me for that love again. That morning, I drive away alone over a horizon other than yours. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Stesha. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Elliott Bay Books, Seattle Public Library, our interpreters, Joshua and Laura, and Mary, the captioner, and everybody out there in the audience who we can't really see, but we know you're there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was wonderful. And Derek, I'm wondering if you want to join us. And great, here you are. Now I'm going to spotlight you so we can all see you. Fantastic. And I'll just remind folks that if you have questions for any of our speakers, either of our speakers, you can pop them into the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen at any time, and we'll go ahead and ask those. In the meantime, I know that you two had questions for one another. So do you want to take a minute, and I'll just kind of hide behind the video and you guys can chat for a little bit?
Well, I mean, left to my devices at this point, I just want to keep thanking everyone. It is such a It is, it truly, I mean, I wind up saying this, and I think it's sort of embarrassing as somebody who's, professional and creative life involves words. I truly find myself unlanguaged in moments like this. Carolyn, that was an absolutely ravishing reading. The book is
Thank you.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
And to have the opportunity to engage with such a culturally rich community, such a compassionate community. Again, it really does put pressure on language and the words that we customarily use. I've said before in readings that I've given, my temptation is simply to turn to the acknowledgements page and read everything that's there from start to finish. Because whether it's your first book or your 50th, it takes so much time, vision, commitment to make a book happen, right? I think quite often the myth is that the writer writes, right? It's a sort of literary auteur criticism. But there's nothing further from the truth. I mean, there's not a single poem I've ever written that wasn't in deep conversation with poets like yourself, poets like June Jordan, poets like Nicole Seeley, like Shahid, who will always be missed, right? And so I just truly want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be with you. And again, I really applaud Elliott Bay Books and the Seattle Public Library for providing this forum in this way for us to gather, right? Like, I would like nothing more than to go out with everyone for milk and cookies, right? Which remains, I think, the greatest moment in the history of live theater. But knowing that this is as close as we can get, I really appreciate and applaud the organizations that are committed to continuing this type of open programming so that we can gather and celebrate voices that truly matter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if there are any questions, I'd love to hear them. And Derek, I have a question for you. Let's see, I had several written down here. Let me flip this over. Yes, I'm very interested in the sort of couple of things, the cultural references in your work, and also this seems to be your work sort of, shall we say, it carries on a very interesting dialogue with narrative. And so I'm interested in what principles of sort of assemblage you use to put together, the imagery that comes in your poems, and the sort of the rhetorical phrasing and rhetorical variety.
Well, you'd think this would be a softball question, wouldn't you? I've always been such an intuitive writer. And I think that this, I mean, that's an incredibly insightful question to ask someone. You had asked me yesterday, for instance, how I sequenced the book, right? It's in 4 sections, and I have to say, after the many years of living with these poems and setting them in conversation with one another, the simplest answer I can give you is that has everything to do with Claudia Keelan's mentorship and her vision. This book wouldn't exist in the form that it does without her keen eye and ear. She gave me the structure of the book. And as we were talking about that, it became clear to me, she shared with me a story about her experience in terms of sequencing. Here I'm talking about a larger structure, right? The structure of a book. And she saw it in ways that I wasn't able to see it. And that was a gift that I will always be grateful for, because it has transformed my ability to look at poems and see that larger conversation, right? That really, this book has everything to do with the vision that she brought to it, and the conversation that she encouraged and invited me to have with the poems. I see it differently now, and I'm hoping that that's a gift that as writers we can give to other poets, right? I know you and I have both been educators for a long time now. And I just think that that can be an incredible challenge. I mean, much like titling poems, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some people just have a facility for it. Some people from their very first book understand the ways in which poems need to be conversing. You know, there needs to be tension, even in a case in which a poet identifies as a more lyrical poet, as somebody who is interested in exploring the field of the poem, the space of the page. You'd mentioned something that's always been very important to me, even in that context, even in you know, to use a very imprecise term, the more experimental phases of my writing life. Narrative has always been the hinge, right? I can't see a poem. I think of poets like Steve McCaffrey, for instance, or Anne Carson at her freest. And I'm still finding those little points of narrative spark that exist, right? And so even in the poems that really get turned loose in the fourth section of this book, I mean, the images to me are always beholden to the telling of the story, right? And you know, again, this was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because you managed to do this in Masquerade in ways that I have rarely seen poets do, in wedding the memoir and the poetic tradition. Because quite often, as I said to you yesterday, right, with memoir, we want the story, right?
Right.
In a memoir in verse, we can't help but also focus our attention on the structure, on the form, on the formalism in the case of poems like this. I'm not going to ask you how you did it, because that's too big a question, but I want to say you've done it brilliantly here, because I felt in reading the book, which I'm totally going to keep doing because it is a humdinger of a book, I found myself fascinated by the fact that you have managed to do that so, I won't say seamlessly because that's not right, but you have given your reader both the appeal of the memoir, right? The telling of the story. And at the same time, you've given your reader the opportunity to explore language unmoored, as we see in poetry. So if you could just do me a favor, you could speak to that for just a few minutes, I would be very grateful.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and we also have a question from Darren Nordley, who's a person who's taken classes from me at Hugo House. So hi, Darren. And I think these two questions are very close. Darren asks, where did you look for inspiration for your latest books? Where do you usually look for it? And I think this is for both of us, but I can say that for this book, Masquerade, I mean, this was a story. This was an experience that I had. It's really based on a real relationship, and that was wonderful and painful and exciting and boring at times, as all relationships are. And it was fraught with all kinds of political and racial and sociological and cultural issues, shared values, and also some values that were quite different. And the responses of the families, the respective families, really very different. So at the time that the relationship occurred, while it was going on, I wrote a few poems. One of them I read tonight. I read Faubourg Marigny, which was, you know, everything in the book is in present tense. Most of it is in present tense. And that was in present tense because it was being written then. You know, we live on Royal between piety and desire. but it wasn't really between piety and desire. It was between piety and Franklin or something. I don't remember. Anyway, but desire was better between piety and desire. But anyway, that always got a laugh. But a lot of those poems, the ones that were written at the time, were mainly free verse and kind of reflected on one aspect of the relationship, mainly that of being, an interracial couple receiving a certain deal of disapproval from outside, the people around, or curiosity, or skepticism. But the later poems, the poems I wrote later, after the, as I call it, the mantle descended upon me, the figurative metaphorical mantle descended upon me to write this book, that I knew that it was going to have to tell the whole story from beginning to end, and it would have to be in poetry. It could not be prose, because prose would have been too overly revealing, because I want to reveal always the essence, the emotional, the just the whole psychic essence, and not get into a whole lot of business about personalities or who he was or who he is. This is a poet who is still active. I'm still active also. So the essence was what was important. So I began writing poems, not in any order, not in particular order, but as I wrote them, as the scenes came to me, and they did come to me as sort of like scenes in a play, often beginning with, sort of a line of dialogue, like, move away from that table, right? And that would set the scene for that scene and the reflection and whatever, and the flashbacks within a poem like that one, Gumbo Nights. But I was able to, put the poems in approximately chronological order, as one does in a story, telling a story, or a nonfiction story. And so that's how that evolved. And many of the poems found themselves evolving or emerging in form, right? Round, ghazal, there's a pantoum, there's a couple of sets of triolets, So it was a fun thing to do. And then I worked on this book for a long time, because I was in no hurry. I was in no hurry with this book. So.
Well, and that's such an important point, and we were talking about this yesterday, right? On the Verge is another book that was long in its making. And I think that that's sometimes true. It's not always the case, but I think it's true that there are certain books that we write, certain poems that we write, that invite that type of time, right? Like we need to live with them, and they need to occupy space in our lives for a longer period. And I think that that's incredibly important. And that also is one of the ways that I would answer that really insightful question. I find myself increasingly committed to what the poet and the translator and critic Donald Ravel refers to as the art of attention. That really is where I have always drawn, again, for lack of a better word, inspiration. That's where I look for poems, in a close attention, because the world and its worlding, right? The simple facts of our existence are so astonishing and extraordinary that no embellishment is needed, right? I mean, they are so exquisite, and also bring us to that place of sublimity where our language begins to notably, conspicuously become inadequate, right? And that's the place at which I find myself always aiming my poems. I think in my ideal world, the place that I live, right, the place in which I dream, I'm writing a silence. And as I continue to grow older and realize the implications of that, as we all over the course of the past 2 years have come closer to what silence means, in so many unexpected and unforeseen ways, that's always going to be a challenge for a writer, for somebody who uses words, for somebody who continues to explore the ways in which they ultimately, and I think you said this so well about the memoir, right? It's a sort of studied in precision, right? I mean, you push language as far as it can go to get at, as you said, that emotional integrity, right? The rawness that verges on the inexplicable.
Yeah.
If any poem that I ever write is able to articulate that, right? I truly feel like I will have written to that point where I can simply be quiet.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, the poems that reach as close to beyond words as is possible,
yeah.
and those moments of sort of that really essential humanity that occur. And I felt that way writing these poems. And
Yeah.
Darren asked one question about what were some of the surprises. And I know that for me, when the mantle descended for me to write this book, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
whole other episode that I may end up writing it as a poem, but at present I've been struggling to try to write it as an essay, how the realization came upon me that I had to do this
Yeah.
with this whole relationship, and how to explore it and recreate and understand what had happened. But that occurs in other poems also, and lines. So there are lines that as you're writing something, and then suddenly a line will occur that came totally out of who knows where, out of the out of the essence of the sky or something. What was it? Beyond the Sky. That was one of those lines in the Gumbo Nights poem where I started, referring to the various musicians, and I was referring to, Sam Cooke, and thinking about how he died at the end of a gun, of the business end of a pistol, from a woman who was angry at him. I think he owed her money, or she thought he did, or something, and she shot him. And that line about how that carried him far beyond the sky, and that was taking an image from his song, right? And yet it altered that image. It did something else with it, and that was a moment of surprise for me in that poem. And that happens, the way a poem will weave from one image to the next. And so, that's one small example of that.
Yeah. Well, and two, I mean, Carolyn, this brings up such an important point, and that is the collaborative dialogic nature of writing, right? It truly is intertextual. In that sense, we are always interacting with one another. We're always listening, and we're always writing outward from that. And I just find the more we're able to acknowledge that, the wider the conversation becomes, right? The more inclusive that dialogue becomes, the richer the cultural tradition, the richer the insight, the louder that silence becomes, right? And that to me is where all of the positive change that happens, right? And in that crucible, when we're able to get together and we're able to truly hear and listen to one another like that. And I see that, and I hear that happening so often in Masquerade. It really is astonishing. Yeah.
We had one more question from Georgia Popoff in the chat. And hi, Georgia, good to see you. Well, good to see your words. Can't see any of the people out there. Georgia says, I've been meditating a great deal on the relationship with the invisible reader behind the words and the inherent responsibility of being in that relationship. Can you both say something about that? Ooh, that's major. I'll say very briefly that as I am writing these poems, I am aware that whoever reads, I don't quite write things for myself. I write them for me, of course. I also write them for the person to whom they're addressed. In this case, to that, that person who was part of this uneasy duo for a number of years, and also for readers who will not know the all of the circumstances. So in a way, it's like translating a language, translating a culture, translating an experience into a form where other people can understand it. And the thing I think of, I mean, many of these, because of my background in high school and college in theater and acting and all that, I always think of the scene, and I think of that invisible fourth wall. And, I am there in the scene, but I'm also the playwright writing this, and I have to be aware of the audience who's looking in, who wants to be fully engaged. So I try to make these poems as rich with imagery as I can, but also to make the circumstances, the dramatic situation, as clear as possible. There's only a few poems in there where I get into some sort of, what shall I say, kind of mystifying or mystique language where you don't necessarily know where you are. And one of them is a poem called Shadow Palimpsests, which is derived from an interesting form, but I can talk about that at another time, But that poem sort of, that's a poem with 5 words per line, and each line is sort of an unfinished sentence that ends in the middle, and yet it may connect in an interesting and unexpected way with the following line, the following sentence. So that's a different sort of poem, and it was written, and as I worked on it, I realized it had a deeper rhetorical purpose that I was not aware of, and it celebrated the loss of some people. So, yeah.
Well, and two, again, I think you've said it so eloquently. I think poems do a tremendous disservice to the reader when they're playful without, and I was simply going to answer the question by letting Ms. Aretha take it for me, right? I mean, in terms of the reader, it has everything to do with a little RESPECT. If you're simply playing, right? In particular, if you're playing in an ironic or a clever way, there's a certain deceptiveness there. There's a disingenuousness there that I think disrespects the reader. I'm all for play, right? There should be more of it the world over, and we should be celebrated. Exactly. I so loved that point in the poem. If you're going to play, you have to understand that you have a relationship that you are tending, right? And the poem, in a sense, is a form of stewardship, and it is a bridge, it is an invitation. If you're just playing, then you're not inviting the reader in, right? If you are simply soloing, right, you're not really. You're not in the band, right? And I think that that's hugely important because, again, poetry, literature, the arts, they're all about the dialogue that they engender. It's all about the conversation that's going on. And if you are not, and I'm not suggesting that we're writing to our readers, right? But in a way we are. Because the reader, whether they're present to us, whether we're envisioning them, they're really fueling the work that we're doing, right? Like I can't, and again, it may be that I'm able at some point to arrive to that holistic silence, but I'm always listening in poems, right? That to me is, that's what I'm following. And if I happen to write something that I can't step away from and look at as objectively as it's possible to look at, and think to myself, and Carolyn, again, you made this point, if I can't find a trace of narrative, if there's not some story present in that poem, I don't feel like I've really done it well. I've not given the reader enough in that moment. And I'm uncomfortable with that, because the reader, I owe the reader more than that. The poem requires me to give more than that. So I really, that to me, in the way that you put it, it just resonated very deeply with me.
That's great. Yeah. And Georgia ends saying, indeed, Derek, each reader or audience member uses menus from their lives they will never
Yeah.
get back to. Yeah. That's great. Thinking of menus and gumbo and etouffee and
Well, now I'm just getting hungry.
yeah, I'm getting hungry. Yeah, I'm thinking of that. Good beans and rice, right? We're coming up on Carnival, and Mardi Gras is coming in a few weeks, and I'm sure the communities that celebrate that way they're going to have another fairly, shall we say, probably attenuated and very very quiet sort of Mardi Gras Carnival, because of the pandemic continues. But hopefully we as writers, we can celebrate sort of within our own hearts, so.
I wanted to jump in here and just thank you both. This has been such a wonderful evening, and it was so wonderful to hear both of you read and then get to eavesdrop on your conversation with one another as well. So thank you so much for that. And thanks to everybody that's watching. I wanted to also let you all know that Elliott Bay Books, our friends and partners at Elliott Bay, have copies of both Carolyn and Derek's books available through their website. And you can find those books at elliottbaybook.com. And then if you go to the chat, I also posted direct links to both authors' books there. And of course, you can find their books at the library as well. I also just posted a link to a survey in the chat and would appreciate it if you take a minute to fill it out after the program. This is a way that we have of being able to understand who it is that we're serving with these programs, and for you to let us know what you're interested in seeing at the library. So if you take just a minute at the end of the program, that would be so helpful. And I actually read all of the surveys myself, so thank you. We're so grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. And we're so thankful to our wonderful speakers, the amazing interpreters and captioner, Laura, who is currently on screen, Joshua, and Mary, our captioner. Thank you to our program partner, Elliott Bay Book Company. Thanks to our sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library Foundation. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Thank you so much. Yes, good night. We'll all be in touch again very soon. Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night now. Bye-bye.